Silicon Valley kind of seems like this area of the country where you're supposed to be the smartest people in the world building products for the rest of us. And once you get there, you realize these are just normal Janes and Joes, and there's nothing special about them. They just have been given permission to think at this level and the resources to operate at this level and to fail at that level. That's when I started to get the inkling of, okay, well, why not me? Why couldn't I be somebody who creates something at scale for the people and the customers that I care about?
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about work on our own terms. So growing up, I had this really good friend who was, shall we say, a strong personality. What set Erin apart is that she had this perspective that, well, take anything. Let's say the lottery. Most people, they're not going to win the lottery. But my friend Erin would say somebody will, so that somebody should probably be me. And I guess it's no surprise that Erin has gone on to be hugely successful in her career. I thought about my friend a lot as I prepared for today's interview, because today's guest is Morgan DeBaun. And on paper, expectations wouldn't be that Morgan would succeed so fabulously at such a young age. People who come from her background rarely raise the kind of venture capital she has been able to raise. They rarely have the business success that she has had, and certainly not as young as she has had it. But Morgan wasn't thinking about that when she built her own company, Blavity. She wasn't thinking about that when she launched Afrotech, which is the biggest Black professional tech conference. She did start to think about that when she decided to offer some advice up to the rest of us. Her new book is called Rewrite Your Rules: The Journey to Success in Less Time with More Freedom. Today, she brings us very explicit lessons that we can all apply to our own lives because, folks, someone is going to have the outcome you want. It should be you. Here we go.
I've been an entrepreneur for now over a decade, and I started my company pretty young. I was 24 when I started my company. I was based in Silicon Valley when I started, and I knew a lot about a little, but I didn't know a lot about a lot. And I think that made me a successful entrepreneur in the beginning because I was really focused on solving a problem for a community that I cared about, which was Black millennials. And along the way, I realized that there is actually a bit of a framework on how I was operating that allowed me to manage the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, to manage the leap from being a full-time employee to being self-employed, to transitioning from being a founder to being a CEO, which is a very different role. And I made a lot of mistakes as well. There was a time when I missed payroll. There was a time when I didn't even like myself. I was getting bad reviews from my employees, and I was like, yeah, these are valid. I'm a terrible boss. And I think that so often for ambitious people, when we aren't always succeeding, there can be this kind of worry about, am I good enough? Am I on the right path? Should I switch paths? And there really is a way to make these decisions. You can use data to make your decisions. You can use your purpose principle, what I call it, in terms of what's your ultimate why to make these decisions. And it doesn't have to be so lonely. And I think early in your career, you are given a roadmap that you follow. Get good grades, study for the SAT or ACT, go to college, make friends. If you want to go to grad school, you follow this path. If you want to do this, you follow this path. And then all that stops at some point. And then you have to start making decisions for yourself.
For you came out of college, and what did you think that you wanted to do at that point in your career? Did you already know, hey, I'm going to start something?
I wasn't sure actually what exactly role I wanted to have. I studied entrepreneurship in undergrad as well as political science. And so I knew that I wanted to help people, and I felt like technology was a great way to do that. Access to information and access to technology is a great equalizer for so many people. I moved to the Bay Area straight after undergrad to work at Intuit, which I loved. And so I joined a rotational leadership program where every 6 months you move to a different part of the company. And it was transformational. It allowed me to see everything from working with our DC team that worked with all the lobbyists on the Hill, all the way to working with the payroll team and people helping small business owners do payroll for the first time instead of doing it on their paper using an app. And that process of seeing how these different teams worked also allowed me, I think, to discover, okay, like these are just people. Silicon Valley, for people who've never been there, kind of seems like this area of the country where, supposed to be the smartest people in the world building products for the rest of us. And once you get there, you realize these are just normal Janes and Joes, just like the rest of us, actually. And there's nothing special about them. They just have been given permission to think at this level and the resources to operate at this level and to fail at that level. And so that's when I started to get the inkling of, okay, well, why not me? Like, why couldn't I be somebody who creates something at scale for the people and the customers that I care about?
I love that moment when you look around and you realize that the thing standing between you and people who are incredibly successful, both financially successful often and successful because they have created meaning in the world, is simply a permission. And it's a permission, in fact, that you are the one to give yourself, not anybody else.
Absolutely.
You introduce a framework, and I want to talk about the rest of your story through this framework because I think it can be actually very helpful for people who are listening, who are with us today. The framework has 3 different, let's call them headings, if you will. Master yourself, master your method, master your growth. But to take a step back, what's the point of the framework?
Yeah, so the point of a framework at all is to help you add clarity to how you're going to make decisions and how your behavior, your day-to-day actions, how you spend your time is aligned with your end goal, whatever that end goal is. And the reason why I start with master yourself is because a lot of people have really clear end goals, but they're unclear about all the steps that are required to get there. So someone could say, I want to be married by 30. Or they want to say, I want to have kids one day, or I want to travel. So they're clear on like these large concepts that are important to them. But then when they look at their life and they look at their calendar and they look at what they did these last 7 days, there's a large gap between where they want to go and where they are. And then it becomes a set of trade-offs that they feel like they're making constantly. And so Master Your Growth is all designed to help people kind of parse through all of that clutter of information and then make a decision about, okay, what do you need to do today? What do you need to do in the next 3 to 6 months so that you can actually start to move the needle? Because I meet so many young people, so many people who year after year, they tell me their goal. And then I meet them a year later and they're in the exact same place.
Yeah, you say young people, I'm thinking all people. I'm thinking
all people, really.
myself from time to time. At the beginning of the year, I wrote this incredible vision for what I wanted the show to be and how I wanted it to grow. And I realized it actually didn't look so dissimilar from the vision I'd written the year before. And I asked myself, well, what happened? What happened that it didn't shift and change and grow? And so often it comes down to that muddled lack of clarity that we have about our core values, really, where we are starting, what is actually important to us. Because once we're clear on that, then we can map our time against it, right?
Mm-hmm. And then it's also being ruthless and just having a lot of discipline along the way. Because what happens is that we're reactive. Things happen in our lives, things happen in the market, things happen in the world, and we're reactive. And that takes us off our path. So my hope through the book and helping people with this framework is that they can be less reactive and more proactive to get to their goals. We have a part of the philosophy that I live by is this philosophy of step change growth. And basically, it's this idea that instead of aiming for incremental growth, instead of aiming for, this year I want to make $150,000 this year instead of $145,000 this year, you say, how do I double my income? Because what happens with the brain when you actually make those big, ambitious goals is it requires you to think differently, right? If I say, let's double the listenership on this podcast and this show, you'd have to think completely differently about how it operates and the marketing that you do and the topics and the people that you bring on. If we say we just want to increase by 5 to 10%, you can kind of just do what you're already doing, but just slightly better.
Sure. But here's the thing. I think I would be like, well, okay, I don't want to actually say, hey, I want to double the audience size because you know what? I don't know how to do that right now while I'm talking to you. And so putting something on the table when I don't know how to achieve it is scary. What do you say to that?
It's absolutely scary. It's supposed to be scary. It's supposed to force you to say, okay, so what is the uncomfortable truth about why this feels scary? You know, the thing about fear is that it's just telling you something about what you need to do in terms of your self-development. I had a time when I was scared of being successful. Like I was terrified of more opportunity. I felt like I'm good. This is a pretty good place to be. Like if I stop today, this should be okay. And so I actually throttled my own success. I was raising money and I wouldn't respond to investors after I met with them, or I would go to conferences and I wouldn't leave the room because I didn't want everybody asking me for things because I was like, well, then I have to do it.
I really support this idea that when you identify the fear, you can eliminate it. It's like cleaning the clutter out of the corners of your house, and you look and the house sparkles. But how do you eliminate it? Is it positive self-talk? Is it a good plan? What is it?
I really challenge people to be bad at something. So like intentionally bad at something. I think hobbies are a great way to get more comfortable with failure and more comfortable with doing something just for your self-development. And I'm a painter. You probably see some of the artwork here in this video. And a lot of times people come into my house and they say, oh my God, I didn't know you were a painter. You never posted any of it. And I say, I paint just for me. I paint for fun. I paint for the experience of painting, not necessarily to achieve any sort of specific end goal. And I'm also a really terrible gardener. This plant is fake. I kill pretty much everything. And every year I have this really ambitious plan where I'm going to grow tomatoes and basil, and we're going to make fresh pasta, and we're going to do all these things. And every year my plants die because I travel so much. And I'm okay with that. Like I've learned to embrace this act of failure as a part of just living and enjoying the moment of the activity. And so I think when it comes to fear, for me, a lot of times is I'm used to doing good at everything. Like there was a time in my life where I only did things that I knew I would be great at.
Really, what you're inviting us to do is just to experiment in low stakes ways with things not working out. It has been my experience, my lived experience in life, that white men seem a lot better at this than most of the other people that I have written about or spent time with. Can anybody learn to be good at this, really?
I'm a Black woman, and there were times in my experience where I felt like, is this possible for me? Like, is it possible for me to raise $12 million in Silicon Valley? Is it possible for me to be in this system that's so clearly, if you look at all the data, not designed for me, right? Less than 1% of venture funding goes to women, and even less of a fraction of that to Black women. So if you look at all the data, like I shouldn't have made it through. And so I think that while there's more safety nets for white men, they seem to fail up quite well in this country. I do believe that women and people of color also can manage failure in a way that is manageable. Like I think you can reduce the impact that failure has on your personal life or your personal finances. There's ways to manage it. I kept my day job for a year while I was working on Blavity on the side. And then once I quit my job, I then picked up a consulting gig, still at my day job, and did that for 3 years, even after I raised my first $500,000 in funding, because I needed to have a safety net because I'm a Black girl in America. But I still wanted to have the freedom of time to spend it and build on my vision.
It feels significant to me, the timing of this, that you did this in your mid-20s, which is often, not always, a time in one's life when one has a little bit more freedom to fail. We often don't have dependents yet. We often don't have partners and children that need us. Do you think that things change, that the stakes change as you move through your career? I mean, you're now a decade beyond that.
Absolutely. I think about this often, and I challenge myself. I have an executive coach, and I challenge myself often with her, and I say, everything is good, I don't want to mess it up. I find myself saying like, we're good, the team is healthy, the business is healthy, we're managing all the ups and downs of the markets, like any other business would, but we're beating the market expectations and things are good. Why mess it up? And I say those things out loud because as a CEO, you don't actually have a lot of people you can express doubt with. So that's why I'm an executive coach. And we kind of walk through that fear. We walk through, well, what happens if you fail? What happens if you fail when the stakes are higher? Making $1 million mistake at my level means jobs, right? It means people's 401ks. It means people's employment. And so there are more stakes now. And I think what I've had to do is manage from a tops down and a bottoms up perspective. And that's also in the book is like, how do you address the risk at the root of the risk? So if the root of the risk is, hey, we want to buy this company, but it's going to be a $3 million burn for the next 2 years, then you say, okay, well, how do I ensure it doesn't go over that? And then how do I also make sure that everyone else around us knows what signals that we are falling past that risk threshold that we've all agreed to? And what actions are we going to take? Like, let's actually game theory it before it happens, because then I can sleep at night because I already know I'm going to spend $3 million. So it doesn't terrify me along the way.
It feels to me like what you're describing might fall under your second framework, which is master your
That's
method.
Exactly right.
You're talking about your method. And you really highlight the need for what you call an intentional action plan. Help us to understand what you mean here.
Yeah, so an intentional action plan and basically outlining how you're going to get to the next level comes down to figuring out who's in your group of your network. Who are the people on your team that are going to help guide you as you're going on this path? Who are those advisors? If you, just like I said, I have an executive coach. Who are those people that you can go to help guide you when you have to make a decision? And then also, what's the data? Like, what is the data telling you? And what metrics are you going to track along the way in your journey to accomplishing whatever your dream is, so that you have indicators earlier, proactive indicators, right, to tell you you're on track or you need to change some things. You need to adjust some things. And I think that for most people, if they were more structured in how they were going about things and they knew along the way, I'm on track, or I'm off track, then they could actually make those small pivots instead of waiting until the end and finding out, oh man, I didn't launch my product, or I didn't hit my milestone that I wanted. I wasn't able to buy that house, right? And then you feel defeated.
Right. A lot of the members of our community are branching out for the first time as consultants or starting a sort of solo entrepreneurship business. Mm-hmm. There are going to be times, I think of them as like the emotional nuclear winters, when nothing's working, when it doesn't feel like anything is working. And so designing in advance who you're going to pay attention to and what indicators and signals you're going to pay attention to is going to help you get through those rough periods and stay the course, I imagine.
Absolutely right. And further, those times of plateau are actually planned, because in those times of plateau, when I think about the step change growth, we think it's basically you're stepping up and then you're flat for a while, right? So outside looking in, you haven't reached a new level yet. You haven't, accomplished that goal yet. And then you jump up, because what's happening in those moments where you're plateauing, in those moments where it looks and feels like things are flat, that's actually the moment in which change is made. Like, that's actually when you're doing the work and you're establishing a new norm for yourself and how you're operating, the habits that you're adjusting, the things that you're doing. That new norm has to sit for a while for change to actually happen.
Every aspect of your framework kind of refers to most of the stories you're telling here. But this third piece of your framework is master your growth, which really is about developing the kind of resilience that leads to long-term success. Do you want to share a little bit, maybe share an example of where we might see this in action in your own story?
Yeah. So master your growth is really important, right? You start with mastering yourself, then you go to mastering your methods. And so you've got a good vision. You understand your why. And then you've got a good plan. You've got the team, you know your data, you know what you're tracking. You've got a great plan forward. And then stuff happens, life happens. And so Master Your Growth is all about, well, what do you do and how do you make decisions when life happens? And then how do you decide when it's time to actually start this process all over again? So when I was going through COVID, like many people, I went through my own personal challenges, but also I had to manage keeping the business afloat. It was in the middle of a lot of disruption and also the George Floyd murder and all the uprisings. And so we were at a time where a lot of things were slowing down, but then also speeding up because Blavity was created to help solve this problem of inequities in this country and creating equality. So we had a lot of business that was growing. And I was tired. I was completely burned out. I was like, I made it through COVID. We made it through George Floyd. The company is healthy. Like, I am a wartime CEO, but I would like to be in my soft life era, and I am tired. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. What am I doing? Like, is this really the life that I'm going to continue to live where it's these big ups and these big downs, and no matter what, I'm expected to operate because I am the boss. I am the leader of this group. And so what I did was I went with my girlfriends to Costa Rica for 30 days, and I gave myself this freedom for whatever I wanted to do for 30 days. I could sit on a boat all day. We could eat mangoes and papayas. Like, I could do whatever I wanted for 30 days.
So a sabbatical, essentially.
It was a sabbatical. Absolutely. It was a 30-day sabbatical. And I redesigned my entire life on that trip. I went back through every single step in my framework where I said, well, what is my new why? What is my new purpose? Who are the people around me? What do I want to do? And I actually decided I wanted to sell the company on that trip. And I decided I wanted to move. I broke my lease and I moved to Nashville. I was living in LA in Hermosa Beach, beautiful apartment. And I said, I don't want this life anymore. And I completely rewrote all of the rules that I was living by at the time and started the entire process over of basically saying, okay, now that I have a new why, I need to go back through every single step and start over. And obviously, I did not sell the company. I'm still the CEO of Blavity today, but I did go through that process. And I talk about it in the book. But Master Your Growth is basically being able to make a decision about, I want to start over in one area of my life. How do I go back through these steps so that I'm able to push my life forward? You know, this was 5 years ago. Now I'm engaged. I've got a 15-month-old son. I live 10 minutes from my parents. Instead of seeing them once or twice a year, I see them every week. And that was a part of my new vision for my life.
Has becoming a parent shifted the way that you think about either your purpose or what you're creating professionally?
No, I don't think so. Like, I think I have more resolve that, like, there has to be people doing the right thing. I think without my son, I think that I would have maybe said, I've got enough money. I don't really need to work anymore. Like, we're good. We could just avoid the chaos, there's a lot of effort to be a conscious citizen right now. Like, it's a lot of effort and a lot of energy to care and to be on the phone with chief diversity officers and be on the phone with the NAACP president and be on the phone with everybody trying to figure out how do we all push forward in these types of environments. And I don't have to do it. So the reason I do it, the reason why I continue to do it is because I believe that it behooves all of us for there to be people who have the power and the skill set and the networks to continue to do the right thing even when it's hard.
Yeah, well put.
I mean, it's like every day I'm like, can we just go back to Costa Rica? Like, I don't need to be here. I'm out.
Oh my gosh. It is totally, totally true. I mean, so much of our show, the spring in particular, is like trying to have real conversations with and for people who are working in DEI. It's like, okay, so you just spent the last 12 years working in DEI. You spent the last, since June of 2020 being first lauded as a hero, then being asked to hire a whole bunch of people, then probably being asked to fire a whole bunch of people, and now your own job is on the line. And when you lose your job, you have to figure out how to take your skill set and apply it to do something so you can pay your mortgage without losing faith in humanity entirely.
It's really tough. I mean, I have a lot of conversations about that with these. I think the recruiters are okay. The people who are D&I recruiters, that skill set's transferable. You just become a general recruiter. That's fine. But it's the people who are managing like D&I programs and initiatives, and they're program managers. So they've got to now go and figure out how they apply their project management skills. And it's just a very generic skill set that I think is going to be difficult.
Where do you see anybody achieving success or figuring out where and how?
No, the people who are okay are the people at the top who are able to change their title to belonging or engagement or things like that. Yeah. And then it's those recruiters at the bottom that were in charge of like talent acquisition. Those folks are generally fine, but everyone in the middle that was like deeply tied to the $100 million investment that was going to be made, like those people were running those programs. It's a really tough market for them.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them are becoming entrepreneurs. They're saying, okay, well, let me try my hand at being a content creator. Let me try being a consultant. Let me try being a coach. Or let me start a family. Like, now's a good time to change my pillars.
Yeah. Well, Morgan, when you see people become a coach, would you counsel them to step aside from the DEI principles in their work and like focus on other things because the market is just not going to be there for a really long time?
I think that they should absolutely not brand themselves as DEI. And I think that's really hard for people because they care so deeply about the work. I'm just seeing people be really stubborn and they don't want to believe that the world has changed. They don't want to believe that the market has changed. I took DEI and Black out of all of our pitch decks for Afrotech and I told my team and I said, I'm going to do this because I care about you. Like, I don't want to do this, but I would rather you have a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if this is what our clients require for them to say yes to this conference, when it's the exact same conference, whatever. Because if I don't, you won't have a job. Mm-hmm. I'm good. I've got stocks.
Yeah.
You do not. Like, this is about you. So I don't want to get the stanky eye. I don't want to hear it.
You just heard from Morgan DeBaun. She's founder of Blavity and Afrotech, and her new book is Rewrite Your Rules. You can find it wherever books are sold. Now, there's a lot to take away from this conversation, but there are at least 3 things that I want you to hold on to. First off, practice failing. It can be really scary, that's fine. Start with something really low stakes, a hobby, anything that you're not tied to, but keep practicing until you realize that you will be okay on the other side. Second, and this can be particularly difficult when you're young in your career and you haven't experienced a lot of it just yet, don't be afraid of stagnancy. Often real growth occurs when things are holding still for a little while. So give in to the stillness, let it be. Finally, if you really want to master your growth, you're going to need to check in with yourself periodically. Reevaluate your goals. Make sure that you are doing the right things to put yourself in line to meet them. Think about this like good personal growth hygiene. Now, we're going to talk about this and so much more at Office Hours this week. Every Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, our senior producer, Sarah Storm, joins me. You can always find us by just going to the LinkedIn news page. We'd love to see you there. And as always, if this episode was helpful to you, if you know someone else who could benefit from it, share it. Send them a text right now. I'm Jessi Hempel. This is Hello Monday. I'll be right back in the studio next week. Hope to see you.